same physical process. So your consciousness is your brain activity, and that's what's leading your life. It seems that what our experiments reveal is that there's like a mechanism unfolding, a deterministic mechanism that leads up to your decision at a later point in time, and that was inevitable. It could only go one way. Experiment I think I've seen on his journey. The fact that when I become conscious of making a choice, that John can 6 seconds earlier predict what I was going to do before I even realised what I was going to do. And that is absolutely extraordinary. 6 seconds is such a long time. I mean, I sort of don't find it so disturbing that, okay, sure, some part of my subconscious mind is building up to a conscious decision. John, by looking inside my head, knows, his conscious knows before I consciously know what I'm going to do. That is really shocking.
Okay, so now let me begin the last part of my talk. So what is the best interpretation of the data from the above mentioned experiments? Experiments done by Leavitt several decades ago and recently by Dylan Haynes and Soon and a group of scientists in Berlin. As I told you, many scientists claim that the experiments provide very strong evidence that free will is an illusion. I do not agree with such a radical conclusion because of several philosophical, I would say conceptual points. So I'm going to raise 2 conceptual objections to the view that contemporary neuroscience provides evidence that free will is an illusion. So firstly, let me introduce the weak conceptual objection. I call it weak conceptual objection. I claim that contemporary neuroscience confuses the notions of free will and free action. Ta-da! Conducting experiments within conceptual framework of freedom of action, neuroscientists are inclined to draw radical conclusions about the freedom of will. I think this is one of the most serious conceptual errors made by neuroscientists. Let me explain briefly what I mean. There are different things in the world, and they have different properties. Some of them look very similar and can be conceptually grouped in the same class of objects and in the same class of properties of objects. Moreover, there are different classes of objects and classes of properties of objects that may look very similar. However, just because they look similar, it doesn't mean that they are the same. It would be conceptually wrong to extend conclusions drawn about one class of objects to another class of objects and about one class of properties of an object to another class of properties of the object. For example, even if our empirical observations provide us with evidence that chickens are not capable of flying, it would be conceptually wrong either to conclude that chickens cannot run or to conclude that birds in general cannot fly. I mean the following. It is legitimate to question freedom of action in mice by investigating their brain and muscle activity, as well as to question freedom of action in humans by investigating their brain and muscle activity, and then using the results of the investigations to draw some conceptual conclusions about the freedom of actions in mice and humans. But it wouldn't be legitimate to extend these conclusions to freedom of will in humans. In order to avoid this error, contemporary neuroscience must find a new experimental paradigm for investigating a neural correlate that underlies freedom of will. So this means that neuroscience must find an experimental paradigm that would deal with the problem of freedom within conceptual framework of freedom of will, not freedom of action. Not all this flexing a finger or wrist or I don't know. So my second conceptual objection. Secondly, so this strong conceptual objection. So the American philosopher Alfred Miller has been developing this kind of objection. He's a little bit complicated. So even when contemporary neuroscience deals with the problem of freedom within the conceptual framework of freedom of action, it is not free from conceptual errors, thereby leading to the wrong conclusions that freedom of action is an illusion. So what I mean? I mean that even when contemporary neuroscience speaks about freedom of action as an illusion, sometimes it is a wrong conclusion. So the results of the above-mentioned experiments lack conceptual clarity. They don't have conceptual clarity. This is my point. So when conducting and discussing these experiments, neuroscientists use such notions as urge, intention, decision, wanting, as though they have the same meaning. So even in the article that we are going to read. So they started with urge and ending with intentions. So however, we need at least to distinguish between intending an action and wanting an action. So if we are able to see this distinction, we are able to give a different interpretation of the results of the experiments, thereby avoiding the conclusion that we do not have freedom of action. So let me consider an example that would show the difference between intending an action and wanting or urging an action. Suppose a colleague of mine, Professor Vasily Klucharov, invited me to a restaurant after my talk this evening. And another colleague of mine, Dr. Anna Shestakova, invited me to the cinema at the same time. Oops. What should I do? Even, yeah, Vasily, a restaurant, Anna, a movie. Even if I wanted to do both things, to go to a restaurant with Vasily and to go to a movie with Anna, even if I wanted to do both things, I couldn't make one decision, one intention to do both. So it means that it is conceptually possible to want to do both things, but not possible to intend to do both things, both contradictory options. So therefore, our intentions have to be different from our wants and urges. So you can have different urges at the same time, but only one intention that would satisfy one or several of your urges. So many experimental data in neuroscience are considered to be a serious threat to the idea of free action, because neuroscientists regard the readiness potential as an activity that forms our intentions in a preconscious way. So, however, if we take into account the difference between intentions and urges, we will see that in the above-mentioned experiments, the activity in the motor area of the brain reflects only our urge to prepare flexing a finger, not the intention to do it. So this leads us to a different interpretation of the experiments. It becomes possible to consider the whole process as forming conscious intention to flex a finger based on an unconscious urge to do so. So this could be the best interpretation, at least, of Leavitt's experiments. In it, a person vetoes the urge to flex a finger before it becomes a fully fledged intention to flex a finger. It seems to be a very plausible suggestion. However, there remains a question about how to explain the fact, how to explain these measurements, that conscious awareness of flexing a finger comes later than the motor activity in the brain. How to explain? The answer could be as follows. The motor activity occurring in the brain is not bound to a particular muscle activity. So in other words, the motor activity in the brain, so to speak, warms up the muscle activity, the urge to flex a finger, but doesn't define it fully, the fully fledged intention to flex the finger. So it is similar how warming up our muscles by doing some physical exercises before a sport doesn't define what kind of sport we are going to do. So we are just physically preparing to play a sport, for example, tennis, squash, or paddle, and only the intention, not on our urge to move our muscles. Therefore, even though the motor activity in the brain determines the muscle activity, there remains a place for freedom of action, for building a fully fledged intention of an action. All what I want to say is that the above-mentioned neuroscientific data do not contradict explicitly our freedom of action. So it remains a question of interpretation. So let me go back to the topic of my talk, free will, illusion or reality. Let me summarize. So initially, I gave you an overview of the basic philosophical approaches to the free will problem. The first one, hard determinism, claims that free will is an illusion because the universe is causally closed and determined by natural laws. The second one, libertarianism, claims that free will is real and therefore determinism is false. The third one, compatibilism, claims that although determinism is true, free will is not an illusion. Then I considered some experiments recently conducted by neuroscientists that seem to support the thesis of free will as an illusion. In my opinion, these experiments neither prove nor reject the existence of free will, because in them, freedom of will is confused with freedom of action. And even claiming that these experiments prove that freedom of action is an illusion is highly debatable to me. So then what? At the end of my talk, you may demand an answer to the central question of the talk. Do we have free will or not? Yes or no? You may demand this question. So please forgive me my ambiguity, but the answer to this question is up to you. So my short answer is as follows. Even if free will is an illusion, it is a real illusion. And that is why it matters. So let me conclude with a metaphor. Free willing and dreaming are very much alike. What is it like to sleep without dreaming? It is like being awake without having free will. That is my answer to the topic. Thank you so much, guys.
So I think it's a nice opportunity for a few questions. I mean, I still think that philosophers are trying to defend themselves, and with very, very sophisticated answers. Still, I think neuroscience has valid questions for philosophers. So we have some space for a few questions here.
And I thank you for a great talk first. So what would be a nice experiment to actually test the free will? How do you think?
Okay, if I had known the new experimental paradigm, I would have been at the Berlin lab with John Dylan Haynes, maybe conducting new experiments.
You can do it here.
Yeah, exactly. I would have been at Vasily's lab.
So you don't know the ideal.
Okay, so I think so. I just, you know, philosophers, they just doubt many things. So they think about possible ways of considering things. But the question of concrete experiments that we could conduct, it is a different task. So I
psychologist and neuroscientist.
No, okay. So let me be honest with you. I haven't thought about it. So maybe.
So we have to come up with experiments, and you will criticize. So you can,
Thanks for your presentation. And I just wanted to ask. You said that children, they don't have like second-order desires, but at what age do you think, or maybe scientists think, that philosophers think that children begin to have second-order desires? So at what point do children become adults?
Okay, this is a difficult question, and I use this distinction, and many philosophers use it, and so I point out to philosopher, the American philosopher Harry Frankfurt. He uses this distinction as well, just to emphasize, just to in order to to understand the point where free will is possible. That's why it is a kind of, you know, a methodological tool to to introduce. But I understand your point. So this is another story. So at what time children become adults? At what point a living being becomes aware of the first order cognitive processes going on in their mind? So it is a question of belonging to the problem of personal identity, and it is a huge topic. So I can't give you an exact answer because I don't know. So, I know a lot of experiments with these red dots and so on. So at what point a child can identify itself as an organism and so on and so on. It's very difficult to say exactly at what point. So when a kid is 11 months, or I don't know, 2 years, or 12 years, and so on and so on. And maybe, so you know, the problem is that I don't know whether you experienced free will. So I don't know whether all adults have second order desires. I don't know. So I mean, it's
So at least one.
yeah, at least one. Yeah, at least
And
one.
I just add one comment. So, for example, if we're talking about a veto as a free will metaphor. So, for example, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex matures around 20 years old. So it can be that you become free relatively late. Who knows? I mean, I understand that this is a very complex question. So, some other questions? Yeah.
I have a few questions. First, I want to ask whether you think this what is it? I forgot the word. You said we have two kinds of desires. The first
Yeah,
one and
first
the second
desire
one.
and second
Yeah.
one.
Do you think that they change their place when you decide to wait one more, or do you still compat after your decision? Or is there second order desire still exist as a second order desire, or it changes?
Okay, yeah, it's a difficult one. You know, I was talking with a friend of mine from Spain about my example with smoking and abstaining from smoking. And so something interesting happened. A friend of mine told me that 5 years ago he stopped smoking as well. And he wants to smoke. So I mean, this is different data of the story, because I didn't want, or I do not want smoke. So now, and that's why I think that my second order desire became my will and became my free will. But with regards to a friend of mine, probably, he didn't experience free will, even though we have the same the same outcome. Yeah, we both stopped smoking. I can't remember exactly. So 5 years ago, let's say. So your question is whether we change in a way. Yeah.
I mean, is the second order desire still a second order desire after your decision, or it becomes a first order desire?
It becomes the will, as I told you. So if you okay, you can have a desire, you can have a second order desire, and if you satisfy, if this desire is effective, then it stops to be a second order desire, because it becomes free will.
It's not a desire.
Because the problem is that I do not want to abstain from smoking anymore. I've already done it. I mean, it would be strange to I don't know how to explain it. So I think that you
Yeah,
get
so we got, I think, Ksenia, we still have a couple of questions here.
Yeah, so I had a question with respect to the term the economists use that's called commitment. So for example, if I want to resist temptation, I at the same time know that I will not be able to resist it when I'm faced with this temptation, so I use commitment. Like I bind myself before that. So is it a manifestation of free will, or is something intermediate? Or where would you place that in the free will?
Okay, my short answer at the moment, I don't know. So I don't know. So I have to think about it. It's a really strange case with commitments, because so sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish between commitments and obligations, and so external circumstances that force us to do something, moral obligations. It's really okay. I have to think about it. Yeah.
Okay, perhaps two last questions. So,
Danil Razeev, thank you for your talk. My question concerns this real illusion that you mentioned at the end of the talk. What is the status of this real illusion, and how it relates to the hardcore reality. In order to answer the question, is free will an illusion or reality, we need to develop an concept of reality which will be common for different disciplines. So how would you place this real illusion within reality?
Okay. So my point is that so you understand that so what I told you at the end of my talk was a metaphor, yes. So behind this metaphor there is a contemporary philosophy of mind called epiphenomenalism. And so my point was that when you sleep, you can continue sleeping without dreams. But you have dreams. So maybe it is not necessary to have these dreams for you, for your cognitive functions. It's not necessary. You just have this as epiphenomenon, as a byproduct. And so probably, I don't know, so probably free will is a kind of byproduct in our being awake. So when we are awake. But my point is that it matters to us. So it is really important to us to dream, to free will. I don't know, so it's wrong, probably grammatically, to free willing, yeah. And so that's what I wanted to emphasize. So even if it is an illusion, it has its place in the unified reality. So I can't give you an extended answer about the notion of reality and illusiveness and so on. It would be it would be difficult to me.
And last question. Yeah. Okay, that's that.
Me?
No.
Okay. Thank you. So my question is regarding scientific determinism and or the determinism, and whether hasn't the concept been sort of disproven by science based on quantum mechanics already, namely the uncertainty principle that you cannot in one time know the velocity and the speed of a particle at the same time, and since this cannot be determined, determinism as such is essentially disproven.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Okay, I was talking 1 hour and 20 minutes. If I had taken this particular topic, so if I had mentioned this particular topic, I would have spoken for 1 hour and 45 minutes today. So I know this field, and so my point was that there are general approaches in philosophy. I just wanted you to know these approaches, and each of them, determinism and libertarianism and compatibilism, has certain difficulties with regard to contemporary scientific data.
But I think what we can also mention is that all three of them exist.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that determinism is disproved.
Yeah, it is not disproved, because so there are people who consider all these concrete data with regard to the principle of uncertainty and so on and so on. All these four forces in the universe and so on and so on. So they consider all that stuff, and then they say, no, I am still determinist. So, and that is why I couldn't give you all the aspects of the topic. I just wanted to concentrate on neuroscientific data because of my respect to Vasily.
We have to stop. I am a determinist. So, we have to stop here. Thank you very much. We have a 10 minutes break and we will continue with the seminar discussing papers related to this topic. Thank you very, very much.